In this tutorial, you'll learn how to design a shape in 2D that once fabricated can be folded into a 3D shape. So first we're going to start with our design. We want to create a new file that's 16 by 12. That's the size of our laser cut bed. Here it is. We're going to be using paper, but I'll worry about that in a bit. So let's start with a cube. That's a basic shape. It has 6 equal sides, all squares. So I'm going to start with a square. Grab the square tool, click and drag. I didn't make that look like a square. It's not perfect width and height. So let's go over here and change that. I'm going to make it 3 for both. I'm going to lock it because I don't want to change that. I also don't want this rectangle to have a fill. I'm going to delete the fill and give it a border of red because I want it cut out. Great. Now this is the first square. I need 5 more squares. And let's use this first square as our base. So the remaining squares, 4 of them are going to go 1 on each side. Think about it like folding up into a bucket or like a flower. So this square I'm going to copy and paste and drag it straight above it. Copy and paste that again. And then I just want this one. And we'll drag it to this side. Copy and paste. Now, I'm doing this by eye, but usually I prefer the positioning because I like to be very accurate. So if you had positioned your base at a certain X and Y location, then you could easily know, given the width and height, exactly where these squares need to be placed. But I just did it by sight, and that's okay. So now I've got my 4 squares comprising the walls of my cube, and that just leaves 1 more square for the top of the cube. So think about all of these coming up as a bucket to create walls for this base. So the top square, the one that I'm left with, just needs to be connected to one of these squares. I'm going to take this one, copy and paste it, and add the last square, my 6th square, here. Now, this doesn't look like a box maybe, but if you can imagine it all folding up onto this base, we have our cube. Now, all of our squares are outlined red, which means every line will be cut, but we don't want that. We only want the outside boundary lines cut while the inside lines are scored so that they can fold. So let's take a look at the base square, this one, which makes up a majority of the inside lines. So there's those 4, and then this is the 5th inside line. We'll come to that. But this can easily be turned blue, the whole square. And that's our base, blue, so that would be scored. However, it still looks, if I zoom in here, it looks a little purple. That's because the other 4 squares that make up the walls have red overlapping lines. So let's turn off base, and you can see them clearly here. We don't want those lines cut. We don't want them there. Overlapping lines in general you never want because it could cause a fire or damage to your material, ruining your project when being fabricated. So we want to get rid of these lines because we don't want them cut and we don't want any damage to our material. So I'm going to click on the first rectangle, which is the top one. I'm going to come up to my knife tool, and I'm just going to make 2 cuts. It doesn't matter how far apart they are. What it did is it created 2 paths here. So the top path is the rest of my rectangle. The bottom path is the little piece that I just cut. So I'm going to delete that. And then on this path, we don't want these lines. I'm going to go to my sub-select tool, and you can delete from there. And now the line is no longer there. So we're going to continue that. And I'm going to keep using my knife tool and my sub-select tool to make cuts and get rid of these pieces that I do not want. And then my sub-select to delete. Okay. You have to make sure that you're selected on the correct path or layer before it will let you make a slice in the knife with the knife tool. And if you delete the wrong line, that's okay. Just do Control Z to undo. There you go. Okay, we'll zoom out, turn my base back on. So that looks great. But now we have this line, and it's actually a double red line, where this rectangle met the other rectangle, which is now a path. So let's go ahead, zoom in there, and we're going to make the first cut on that rectangle. And again, I'm finding that path. There we are. And I am going to my sub-select tool, and I'm going to delete those points. Now, I do have another red line there. So let's find that path. There it is. You can tell because the boundaries light up. If I move over, the squares are there. With it selected, I can still use my knife tool to make a cut. So now I have a separate path. And because we had previously cut on the other side of it, we're going to have some, like this is just the bottom half. So on this one, when I delete this point, it might look like it deletes the whole thing, but it isn't. We just have to go over to our appearance and select and unselect closed, so it knows that it's not a closed path. Do the same thing with this one. Again, it looks like it deleted everything, but select and unselect closed. Now, where those lines were, we need to create a new line. So I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to turn it blue, go above it, click, straight line down, and go below it. So now that is a blue line all on its own, and we will come in with our sub-select tool, click on that line, and zoom in so that we can move our points down so they're on the red line. Great. At this point, we need to modify our design to fit on our material. Remember, we said we'd wait and we'd jump back into it. So this is taking up a lot of space on my 16 by 12 inch bed. If I go ahead and select it all and group them together, I can see that my group is 12 inches wide and 9 inches tall. We're going to be cutting out on a piece of paper that's 8.5 by 11 inches, so it's too big. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool to make a boundary of our material. So the width, I'm going to do landscape, 11 by 8.5 is the height. I'm going to put that right in our top left corner. X and Y will both be 0. I'm going to move the rectangle down just so that I can see the group on top of it. I'm going to lock it because I don't want to edit it. Click on the group, and you can see that it overlaps. It doesn't fit on. So let's go ahead and lock our proportions again. And the widest our material is 11. When we cut, we like to give a little bit of a margin. So instead of saying 11 inches for my width, I'm going to say 10.5. And then I'm going to move my design so it's a little bit more centered on the page of the material. Great. So now we can take our rectangle, which is our material, unlock it, and delete it. Because when we export it, we'd rather not have that material on there. So I'm going to go to File, Save, Files, Export as a PDF. The largest size I can do is 150 dpi. It downloads, and then I can take that file and I can upload it for fabrication. However, if you're a really good designer, you may have also been thinking while we were designing about the user and how easy this design will be to assemble, which it is okay right now, but we could make it better. These four sides that make up the walls of the cube, it might be easier to connect them together if there were maybe extra tabs on the sides. We don't need to add the tabs to all of the sides, but just to two of them. I'm going to grab the Polygon tool and create a hexagon, a six-sided shape that's just slightly smaller than the width of one of my sides, which is 3 inches. So when I click and drag this, what I want to do is make sure that I'm keeping my the top and the bottom flat, so that when I can come in here and change my height to be 2.75, it doesn't warp it. Okay, so with this selected, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to place it kind of halfway in the cube here. I like that. So I'm going to copy and paste it, do the same thing over here. I'm not going to worry yet about the fact that they're overlapping or that they're filled in. We'll take care of that in a second, but I'm going to copy and paste both of those and drag them down here. Okay, so now that I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these shapes and I'm going to delete the fill, put in a border of red, and I don't want the inside stuff. So where they're overlapping with this shape, I don't want. So I'm going to select all three of these shapes. I'm going to come up, union. I wanted union. Okay, so now I have some tabs, and it got rid of the inside lines, but that's okay because we need to make our own. So I'm going to do the same thing over here after I get rid of my fill and give them a border of red. There we go. Do the same thing, select all three, union them, and then we'll go and grab our pen tool again, and with the border of blue, I'm going to zoom in. And, you know, it might be easier instead of drawing in here to draw outside. Just know that it's a straight line. If you hold down the shift key, it will automatically make it straight for you. So I have that line. I can come back in here, select it, make sure that my height is 3. That's actually I need it 2.75, right? 2.75. Come back in here and I can place it now right where I want it to be. And then copy and paste, bring another one, and if I zoom in, I think I'm right on it. Okay, just to make sure. So those two have been there. We copy and paste them, and I'll be able to drag them down to the bottom as well. There we go. Before we go ahead and export this and upload it for fabrication, we have to remember the material it's going to be cut out on. So currently, our design takes up most of the laser cut bed, but we'll just be cutting this out of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or cardstock. So let's go ahead and select all of these objects and group them. It'll just be easier for us to see up here. The rectangle was locked, so that's why I didn't get in the group, but I'll go ahead and move it in the group. Okay, so now this group I'm going to lock. I don't want to be able to edit it right now. We want to create that material page. So I'm going to go back to the rectangle tool, click and drag, make my width 11 and my height 8.5 as a landscape. I'm going to move it into the corner, so X and Y will both be 0. I'm going to get, actually I can keep the fill, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to move the rectangle though underneath so that I can see our shape. Now I'm going to lock the rectangle so the material, I can't move it, and I'm going to unlock the group. Now that group, if I bring it up to 0, 0, it's too big. It goes over the paper. It's 12 by 9. So we're going to have to shrink it a little. So my width is 11. I usually like to give a bit of a border. So let's do 10.5 as my width. Now my height is 7.8. That is fine. And I'm just going to move the group here to be a little bit more centered. There we go. Now it is fitting inside my piece of paper. I'm ready to save this, export it as a PDF, and submit it for fabrication. So I will File, Save to Cloud. Remember, the naming convention is your name. The project, so 3D shape, and the material, paper. Great. Then I could export this as a PDF. Before I export, I'm going to delete the material though, just make it easier. So we can go File, Export as a PDF. The highest DPI you can go, in my case, it's 150. But downloaded it as a PDF page. There's my design. And from here, I can submit it for fabrication.